If you're consistently losing more than about a pound or two a week, you might be losing muscle in the process. Welcome back. Wolf Coaching, Milo Wolf, soon to be doctor by the way, coming at you today with a video about weight loss and how fast you can lose weight without gaining muscle. And why in fact, losing weight too fast could be hurting your muscle growth, could be hurting your health, and a whole lot of other things. Let's touch on muscle loss first. When you're cutting, the last thing you want is to undo a lot of that progress that you made during the previous massing phase or previous bulking phase. How fast can you lose weight without losing muscle? This is where a meta-analysis by Murphy and colleagues comes in. Looking at a total of 59 studies, what they found is that a deficit of more than about 500 calories per day results in some degree of muscle loss, such that the faster you lose weight, the more muscle you lose. Now, does this mean that no one should cut faster than about a 500 calorie deficit per day? For context, a 500 calorie deficit per day would equate to exactly a pound per week. So you would lose on average a pound per week, and that should prevent all muscle loss, right? Well, not quite. There's a couple of caveats or limitations to that figure and those findings that I would like to bring up. Number one, how big of a deficit you can get away with without losing muscle very much depends on how good the conditions for muscle retention are. If you're a beginner who's never lifted, you have great genetics, and you're on PDs, you can probably go into a bigger deficit than 500 calories and actually gain muscle. Conversely, if you've been training for 15 years, you're getting bad sleep, you're highly stressed, your protein isn't even on point, being in a 500 calorie deficit might actually result in some pretty substantial muscle loss in that situation. So the biggest deficit for you to be in without losing muscle very much depends on how good your conditions are for retaining that muscle. The second big caveat is I do think it depends on your body weight. If you weigh 100 pounds, losing a pound a week is actually a relatively fast rate of weight loss. For instance, for someone weighing 100 pounds, it's not uncommon to have maintenance calories around, say, 1600, 1800 calories. And so in that situation, losing a pound a week would actually require you to eat about 1,100 to 1,300 calories. This might actually be excessive in some cases. And so if you're a very light individual, you might want to go a bit lower than 500 calorie deficit per day. Conversely, if you weigh 200 to 300 pounds, you can probably lose weight a little bit faster than 1 pound per week. You can probably go all the way up to almost 2 pounds or about 2 pounds per week without losing muscle mass. The final caveat I wanted to add is it does somewhat depend on your body fat percentage. If you're a bodybuilder and you're currently 5% body fat, losing a pound a week is actually pretty fast. Most bodybuilders, towards the end of their prep, natural ones at least, typically lose about half a pound a week, if that. Conversely, if you're 40% body fat, your body is actually in a state where it wants to release some of the energy from the body fat. And so you can likely be in a bigger deficit than 500 calories per day and still lose fat and retain muscle just fine. So take this all together, and I think that for most people, a daily deficit of about 300 to 800 calories is good. Closer to the bottom of that range for people who are lighter and who have worse conditions for retaining muscle, and closer to the top end of that range for people who are heavier and who are in better conditions to retain muscle. So one potential issue with cutting too fast is losing that hard-earned muscle. Issue number two is hunger. The faster you cut and the lower your calories have to get as a result, the hungrier you will likely be. Hunger is one of the main obstacles to cutting for anyone. If hunger gets too high, adhering to the diet becomes very difficult and you eventually quit the diet, which prevents you from losing any weight anymore. So if you're trying to cut with an 800 calorie deficit and you're finding it's difficult to stay consistent because of just how hungry you get, consider just reducing it to about 500 calories instead and see how you fare. Issue number three, and this is a huge one. As you may or may not know, I am an online coach. I've actually coached hundreds of people at this point, and this is one I see over and over again. And I think a lack of awareness of this one limitation of faster cuts is really a problem. The faster you cut, the more difficult it becomes to remain sociable, or you can no longer partake in social activities in the same capacity as you once used to. For example, let's say that every Friday with your partner, you go out for dinner and then hit the cinema and get some snacks at the cinema too. And maybe you even go out for drinks afterwards. That right there is going to be several thousands of calories. Is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily, but if you are trying to lose weight quite fast, then that becomes an issue because you can no longer just splash 1,000 or 2,000 calories on that date without it really harming your overall rate of weight loss or meaning that you have to compensate in your calorie intake the day before or the day after, making you excessively hungry and feeding into that issue number 2. For some people, this absolutely is not an issue. If they're happy to make that sacrifice, more power to them. But for a lot of people, eating socially, drinking socially are big parts of their lifestyle and what they enjoy to do, and so sacrificing that is an inherent compromise that comes with faster rates of weight loss. Issue number 4 with faster rates of weight loss is actually an issue I've talked about in a recent video on relative energy deficiency. You can check that out here. In short, if your calories get too low, you may experience negative symptoms associated with low energy availability. This can range from irritability to depression to worse performance in the gym to impacts on a variety of systems within your body, like your bone health, like your menstrual cycle, like your immune system. So actually, in certain cases, trying to cut too fast can put you in a much worse position as far as muscle retention, as far as some of your body's systems go, as far as your training performance goes. Just a lot of bad news, really. With all that in mind, let me give you some recommendations on how fast you should lose weight. As a rule of thumb, for most people, your daily calorie deficit should be between 300 and 800. Closer to 300 when you're in worse muscle retention conditions, like if you're highly stressed, you've been training for a while, etc. And closer to 800 when you're someone with good muscle retention conditions, like if you're new to lifting, if you're on steroids, if you have great genetics, if you're training hard, that sort of stuff. If you're someone who's lighter, you should probably err on the lower side of that range. Whereas if you're someone who's heavier, say about 200 to 300 pounds, you can probably err on the higher side of that calorie deficit range. Losing weight too fast has a wide variety of negative consequences, and it may actually predispose you a little bit to regaining that weight afterwards. Losing weight too fast can definitely increase your hunger and reduce your ability to be sociable within your lifestyle like you usually would. With all that in mind, a calorie deficit of about 300 to 800 calories will be achievable, realistic, and sustainable for most people without losing muscle. That's the video. If you like the video, please comment, like, subscribe. Let me know if there's anything you want to see in the future. I'm definitely looking for ideas. So leave that below and I'll try and get on it. Peace.